Good afternoon, and thank you for joining us for the Outdoor Art Club's presentation of the Great Backyard Bird Count. I'm Kathleen Taylor, and I'm working with Robin Geisler to bring you today's program. For those of you who are not familiar with the Outdoor Art Club, we're a nonprofit women's organization founded in 1902. The club engages in civic, cultural, and charitable work in Marin. To give you just a few examples of the things we do, the club organizes cleanup days along Marin's beaches. We prepare and serve meals for the homeless at Jonathan's Place, and we provide 2 annual college scholarships for deserving TAM High graduates. The Outdoor Art Club also hosts a public speaker series so that we can bring our community programs just like this one. I have just one housekeeping item. Today's speaker plans to leave some time at the end of her presentation to answer your specific questions. We'd like you to enter those questions using Q&A, which can usually be found at the bottom of your Zoom screen. And now it's time for me to introduce Sheila Johnson-Brousseau, the program chair for today's event. Hi, Sheila.
Hi, thank you, Kathleen. Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome. We're glad you could join us for today's program on the Great Backyard Bird Count. It truly is one of the most inspirational and inspiring ways you can enjoy nature and use your birding observations to help conserve birds. We're delighted to be joined by Becca Rodomsky-Bish, project leader for the Great Backyard Bird Count at the Cornell Lab of Ornithology. Becca is an environmental educator with expertise in native habitat, sustainability, and conservation education. At the Cornell Lab, she leads 2 projects, the Great Backyard Bird Count and the Garden for Birds, both focused on empowering people of all ages and experience levels on how to take meaningful action for birds and biodiversity. In today's program, Becca will share with us the story of how the Great Backyard Bird Count began, how it works, and how you can participate each February. We're delighted to have her with us, and you too as well, as we connect today with birds, science, and the natural world right outside our door. Welcome, Becca.
Thank you, Sheila. That was a lovely introduction. I'm going to go
So
ahead.
happy to have you here.
Yeah, it's so great that you all invited me to be here. All right, so let's see. Can you all see those perfectly? Full screen?
Yes, thank you.
Right. Well, thank you again. It is an honor and a privilege to be here with you all today. And I think it's pretty safe to say I'm with very like-minded folks who I hear murmurings from Kathleen and Sheila and Robin are gardeners, which I am a passionate gardener myself, and also nature lovers and enthusiasts, hence my love of birds and engagement in this work. So as Sheila said, this is one of my 2 babies that I take care of and manage at the lab. The Great Backyard Bird Count is an annual event. This year it is going from February 13th, which is a Friday, starts on a Friday, till the 16th, which is a Monday. The Great Backyard Bird Count, also known as GBBC, always runs over President's Day weekend in the US, and it's considered Family Day weekend in Canada. So those dates change every year, but it's always over that 4-day week. And really, as Sheila articulated, this is one of the most magical events to bring people together, literally from all over the world, to appreciate and enjoy birds together. And whether you're like these preschoolers that are so sweet pictured here, watching a flock of geese, or whether you're an expert birder traveling to all corners of the world to capture your birds, this is a really fun and open event to everyone. And one of the reasons I personally love this event kind of is articulated in that adorable picture of the yellow-rumped warbler. It was submitted last year, and it gives me a chuckle every time I look at it because this bird looks so fascinated by this dog toy. And that is really what this is about, right? We share our spaces with birds, and that interaction happens all the time. Sometimes we are keenly paying attention to it, and sometimes we're not. And this event is an opportunity to spend some time paying attention to the beauty of birds and all that they provide for us. So the history of this event is quite interesting. I haven't been managing it for as long as it's been around. I've been the manager for about 6 years or so, but this started in 1998. So we are in our 29th year. We're hitting our big 30 next year, which is very exciting. And it was really an experiment. The Cornell Lab and National Audubon Society came together and said, I wonder if we organize an event where we invite people to submit their bird sightings to us on an online platform if people would actually do it. Now, today, that question seems kind of funny to ask, but at the time, this was novel. And this was the first online participatory science project where people could see submissions and data in real time that were being submitted. And this started purely in the United States. So this was not a global event when we started. And the response was overwhelmingly positive. People loved this. They were having so much fun. And so that led, and this is probably my favorite fun fact about the Great Backyard Bird Count, for those of you that know the eBird tool, that led to the development of eBird, right? This project predates this conservation tool that's now used all over the world, one of the largest participatory science projects that exist and is used for conservation all the time. We were sort of the precursor, the test child, so to speak, to see if this would work. And so in about 2002, the eBird team said, let's do this. Let's design a tool that people can submit their data 365 days a year all over the world and see what happens. And the project, the Great Backyard Bird Count, while eBird was kind of behind the scenes doing its development, the Great Backyard Bird continued. All of our data was kind of uploaded to its own database on our website. And we noticed that people in Canada also were avid birders and wanted to share their data. So the project expanded in 2009 to include Birds Canada, to expand our Canada reach. And then we kind of came back to eBird after they had gotten their feet under them, so to speak, and the tool was launched and doing really well all over the world at that point, actually. And we decided, let's integrate with eBird formally. We'll put our data into eBird since they've been able to launch their tool and really make this a global event. Let's really blow this up. Let's collect as much data as we can over these 4 days everywhere. And then when I took on the project, actually, it was the year after I took on the project, I noticed that we really needed something that allowed people who was at the more the beginning journey of their birding event. For those of you that know the eBird tool, you really have to know your species when you use it because you're creating checklists and you're writing down the names of the birds. Or not writing them, but entering them. But if you're looking at birds for the first time, you don't know what their names are, right? And so we integrated the Merlin Bird ID app in 2021, and now that allows people who are kind of in the early beginnings of their journey to also contribute and participate. And as many of you know, this is a popular thing. So the shadow across the screen here represents the sun, and this event, over GBBC weekend, usually Saturday and Sunday are our biggest contribution days. And this is a visual graphic we put together and we mapped all of the data that's coming in from around the world. And it's going to go again. So I'll walk you through what's happening. And so as you can see, this shadow, which represents the sun, as it moves across the screen, New Zealand lights up, Australia lights up, Japan, all of the India, China, Africa, parts of Africa, many parts of Europe, South America, and North America certainly is still where we have a large percentage of our participation. But literally the world lights up. And I love watching this map. I always have it pulled up when I'm managing this project over the weekend. And this is probably my favorite visual to pull up with my child, actually, who's very deep into geology and geography. And his mind gets blown every time he's seen people literally from around the world. Because every time one of those little yellow dots flickers, a checklist is being submitted. Somebody's watching birds and submitting them to us. So this is really becoming popular. And a person who was interviewing me for GBBC this week said, why do you think birds are becoming such a passionate thing for people? And I said, well, I think there's lots of reasons. The tools are very neat. Merlin and eBird are neat. But I think even deeper than that is we're living in an era where connection to nature has become increasingly harder and less common. We're in a digital age. People are behind screens a lot. And birds are truly everywhere. And so taking a moment to look out your window, go for a walk, birds are there and they allow us to make that quick connection to the natural world. So that's one of my personal um, theories about why birding is becoming so popular. As far as what you do for GBBC, it's pretty straightforward. And we try to make it so. So we ask that people, whether you're doing this by yourself, whether you're doing it with your grandchildren, with a school group, with friends, with family, you spend 15 minutes and you can spend that time wherever birds are, which generally is everywhere, and tell us what you see or hear and enter that into the Merlin Bird ID app or eBird. Both of them are great tools. If you know your birds and you're really comfortable identifying them and counting them, you want to probably use eBird. But Merlin is a great option for those of you that want to just tell us what birds you see. And I'll talk a little bit about the difference between the tools in a couple of slides. But as you can see, this event is really popular. These are two images. The top one is from India, a group participating. India generally is our second highest contributing country after the United States. They take this event and run with it. It's really exciting to see all that they do. And then this bottom image is a family friend group. I think it was in Ohio or somewhere in the Midwest. We get lots of wonderful pictures of both birds and people over the weekend. It's really inspiring. And as I said, you can really do this anywhere. Wherever birds are, we want to know about them. Because generally I'm, busy managing this project, I'm generally reporting birds from my feeders. So I'm generally sitting at home with my family and monitoring the project and answering questions and so forth. So feeders is great. If you have bird feeders and you want to share your birds from there, perfect. Maybe you go for a morning walk or an afternoon, evening walk, and you're just going to kind of scan and pay attention and see what birds are around. That's fine. Perhaps there's a school group that participates, and we do have quite a few school groups that love to do this event. Libraries, parks, businesses, places of worship, anywhere that there are birds, you can kind of organize a group and go out or go by yourself and see what you can see and hear what you can hear. And why participate? Aside from the fact that it is so fun and it's birds, and it's the middle of February, and who doesn't need something to do, right? Those are all good reasons. But connection to nature is a real valuable one, and it's one that we're seeing more and more people embrace. This is a group of students, a bird club, that submitted their picture to us last year. And it's not just connection, it's actual science. You're actually doing something. You're contributing to a participatory science project that data is going to turn into something that can be used by conservation scientists. So that's pretty powerful. And it provides incredible data. It's a part of the eBird database that we can then tap into and get a better understanding of sort of the long-term impacts that birds are facing all over the world. And as many of you likely know, I know certainly when I was growing up, I actually went to school not too far from your area at Sonoma County, in Sonoma County. I went to Sonoma State, and I studied science. And I would go out into the field every summer, mostly when I had a break, and do science with the professors there. And that was kind of how science was done, right? Participatory science has completely shifted this scientists have to be in the field all the time doing the work. We can create protocols that anybody who wants to, because we're all innately scientists, we're all curious humans, can grab onto that protocol and actually enter data for us, bird data for us. So bird data has become a very powerful source of sort of capturing the attention of people all over the world and then being able to turn around and use that for good purpose. So you may be asking yourself some of the things that, what do we learn from this? Well, first and foremost, the GBBC data goes into the eBird database, and that database has become huge. I mean, millions and millions of submissions of birds from all over the world, 365 days a year. So you can imagine the power that that kind of data can yield when you're asking conservation questions and trying to seek answers. I don't have the 2025 number yet because probably they're still tallying them, but the number grows every year. And in 2024, 248 scientific publications used data from the eBird database. And the questions are very diverse, from climate change type questions to changes in land use and the impacts that's having, to bird population health and abundance themselves. It's incredible what scientists can use with this long-term data. And we also can see year-to-year changes, migration pattern changes. This being in February, it's right before a major movement, a major migration that birds go through. And so it's really nice to get your finger on the pulse of where birds are right before they all kind of start to move and shift because of the changing of the sun. So it's a great opportunity to sort of push pause and see where birds are before they start their movement. And as Sheila mentioned, this has been an incredibly successful project. We see growth generally every year, which is really exciting. And this number always astounds me. We generally pass it by a couple of species every year, and that surprises me because there's only about 10,000 to 11,000 known species of birds in the world. And last year, collectively, we documented 8,078 of them. We're getting so close. And many of the remaining birds are very hard to spot and live in almost very remote areas. So it becomes harder and harder to increase the number of birds that we see, that we identified species every year. But we had about 217 countries or eBird subregions. eBird kind of breaks some of the regions down further. So huge, huge global participation. And we had about 838,000 people participating last year. So we kind of have a secret goal this year. It's not so secret because I've said it a few times, but a personal goal of trying to reach about 1 million participants this year. We're hoping we can cross that threshold. And there was about 409 community events. I'm going to show you a map in a few minutes. And if your group, the outdoor group, or if you're a part of another group that's participating in this, you can put that on the community map, and we can get a better sense of different communities that are participating in this event too. And here's one from last year that I pulled because I thought this audience would appreciate this because it's not too far from your homes out in California. But we see lots of really fun things every year, and we tend to pull out some of the more interesting ones and report on them. But last year, one of the largest flocks of common murres were seen on the Devil's Slide Trail and Egg Rock in San Mateo, California. And this is just a beautiful, beautiful image. I used to live out there, so I kind of get a sense of how many birds this is on one giant rock, right? Compared to the space around it. And it's very hard to count this many birds. It's always an estimate. But we ask people to kind of break this image up into quadrants and count a quadrant and then multiply it, which is probably what this individual did when they reported this flock. But incredible reporting last year that came in. We always see fun things like that every year. But we also contribute to understanding more fine scale data by adding the GBBC data to the eBird database. And this is a map. I'm going to let it run a few times and I'll walk you through what's happening here. The only reason we can create visuals like this and know where birds are when is because of participatory scientists like those that do GBBC. This is the ruby-crowned kinglet. And you can see that this bird has a really unique ecology. It's a migrant, right? So the darker the color, the more the birds, the lighter the color, the less. And you can see in the winter here in December and January, they're down south and into Mexico. And then they start to move up north in late April, early May. They go up to their nesting habitat. They spend some time there, and then they slowly move back down in the winter time to be in the warm climate where they can forage. You are lucky in California that you can have these birds all through the winter because you can see that many of them stay. The climate in California is suitable in most areas for these birds to stay year round. But the ability, I can watch these maps all day. They blow my mind. And the only reason we can do this kind of mapping with bird data is because of the participatory science data that comes in events like the GBBC. So this is another thing that we do. And you can imagine as conservation scientists, you can begin to understand where we can focus our efforts. So for example, this species spends a lot of time down in the Mississippi outlet there into the Gulf. So if this bird starts to struggle and show declines, or in their nesting habitat, maybe we're seeing nesting decreases, we can begin to concentrate the sort of initiatives that this bird species might need in order to have that population rebound. So having really geographically specific information can really power effective conservation. And we can also begin to get a better sense of trend changes in different bird species. This is not an active map, but a static map. And this is a bird that is likely very familiar to most of you. It's the American robin. And this is somewhat shocking data. The American robin is actually in a pretty steep decline in a variety of places that it used to be very common. So you can see on this map that in the Midwest and parts of the Northeast, we are seeing fewer and fewer robins. There's a little bit of an exception there in the Appalachian range where there's some increases. So the red is decreasing in abundance and the blue is an increase. And then you can see over on the West Coast that robins are being seen further north, up into northern parts of the United States, Canada, and up into Alaska. And you can kind of get a sense for how bird populations might be fluctuating and changing. And this is likely due to a variety of reasons. But knowing that it's happened is sort of the beginning for scientists to begin to explore the whys. And as many of you likely know, this is a very sobering graphic, but birds are in trouble. There is clear writing on the wall that we are losing birds at a rapid rate. We have lost about 3 billion birds since 1970. This graph goes back as far as 1970. And the dotted line there through the middle is sort of static, no loss, no gain. And you can see the vast majority of the birds fall under that line. We're losing grassland birds, we're losing forest birds, we're losing our coastal birds. So birds are in trouble, and this should be a wake up and alarm call for anybody who is passionate about birds. There are some exceptions to this. Wetland birds are on the rise. Raptors, which aren't actually mapped here, but raptors are also generally on the rise. And a lot of that is because of active conservation. And this, again, is another reason why events like the GBBC and tools like eBird are so critical, is because we can really get a better sense of how things are going. And if they're not going well, which is the writing on the wall right now, we need to be taking action to fix that. Oops. So back to the GBBC itself, there are two tools, well, technically three, but two major tools you can use during this event if you want to participate. And two of them you can have on your phone. If you have a phone or a mobile device, they're all free and they're all compatible with any version, even tablets, if you prefer to use a tablet. One is called Merlin Bird ID app, and I hope many of you maybe have heard of this or even have people that have used it. Maybe you are a user of it already. You can use Merlin to participate over those 4 days. You can also use eBird. eBird has a mobile app that's really great. I like eBird mobile when I'm going for a walk because I can have sort of my checklist right in front of me and add to it really quickly. It saves me from kind of writing down and having to come home and add it. So I usually use that when I go for a bird walk and I'm going to be gone for a little while. And then if you're not a phone user, or perhaps you don't want to put another app on your phone, there's also an online entry form that you can enter eBird data on a computer. Unfortunately, Merlin is not available on a computer. You do need to use eBird if you're gonna do computer entry. But these tools are very easy to use. They're very user-friendly. On the GBBC website, which it's actually in the corner here on almost every screen, birdcount.org, and I'll have a screen at the end too. But I have instructions that are pretty clear about how you would participate in the GBBC using these tools. So if you struggle with them, there's some support documents for you. And for those of you who are not familiar with Merlin, I just want to give you a little bit of a sense of how you would use Merlin to participate, what this looks like. So hypothetical, we're out on a walk, and there's this beautiful flash of red that lands in a tree like this. And we think, wow, I know my birds reasonably well, and this red bird looks really different. I'm really not sure what I'm seeing. Pull out your Merlin, and the first thing you're going to be asked for is your location. And if you have your geolocator on, this may be automatic for you, but you can also confirm if it's not pulling up automatically what your location is. So first thing is where you saw this bird. And then it'll prompt you to ask for the date. And this is important for birds, right? Because we know in California, pretty lucky, you have a lot of birds year round, but not true, especially where I am in upstate New York. We have a lot of migrants, right? So what time of year you're seeing birds will affect what the tool will tell you you're likely seeing. And then you're going to give it a size, right? So as small as a sparrow, as big as a goose, and a couple of pretty obvious birds you're familiar with in the middle. You'll give an approximate size to the bird. And then you can pick up to 3 main colors. In this particular example, we're going to say, I'm seeing a lot of red and perhaps a little black. So we're going to pick those 2 colors. And then last but not least is behavior. What is this bird doing when you identified it? And the magic of machine learning is behind the scenes, this tool can crunch all of these answers and then give you a set of options of what that beautiful red bird is that landed that you might be seeing. And sure enough, doesn't always happen this way, but the first hit is correct. So that bird was a scarlet tanager. And if you wanted to contribute your scarlet tanager to the Great Backyard Bird Count, you would hit that "This is my bird" green button. It's going to confirm the location and the date that you saw it, and you save it with Merlin, and there you have it. You have participated in the GBBC. And you only have to do that once over the 4 days. Generally, it's so addicting that people are doing this all weekend long, but once counts. That counts as participation. And here is one of my favorite features of the Merlin Bird ID app. And we tested this before the webinar, so I'm really hoping this works. This is actually a location in South Carolina. And you can do this with your own Merlin app. You would open up the sound ID, you would get as close to the birds that are calling or singing, and you would push the play button, and you literally will record the birds, or the tool will record the birds, and it will identify the birds in real time. So this recording was taken in August, again in South Carolina, in sort of a wetland area. So these are not necessarily all birds we're going to see this time of year in February, but it gives you a sense of how this tool works. And for those of you who have never used this tool this way, it truly is mind-blowing for a lot of people. And this sound ID, I think, has made a lot of people more aware of the diversity of birds around them that they just didn't know were there, because they're very hard to see at times. So let's see what we're going to hear in August in South Carolina. And I'm not going to play the whole thing, but it'll give you a sense. Carolina wren. I have those at my feeder right now. Solitary warbler. Ooh, some good warbler vireo species. Every time it goes yellow, that's the bird calling again. And you can see the spectrograph at the top of the sound if you're interested in the visual of their sound and call. Northern cardinal, one of my personal favorites. So you can record for as long as you want to. And wherever you are, wherever the birds are singing and calling, it will identify them for you, and you can go back, which is how you would participate. If you want to use Sound ID to participate in GBBC, once your recording is done, you would push stop, and you would open up the song of the bird that you heard and was accurately, hopefully, identified. And you would confirm, go back and listen to the recording and say, yeah, that's it. And again, you would hit the green button and submit the "This is my bird" with the sound ID. So sound ID is completely an option for participation. I get a lot of questions about how accurate Sound ID is, as you can imagine. For North America, Sound ID is relatively accurate. In places in the world where we don't have as much data yet, it can error a little bit more often. It's not 100% accurate, but it's close. It's in the 90s. It's generally 90% accurate. So have fun with Sound ID if you're going to participate in the Great Backyard Bird Count. It's really a mind-blowing tool. Now I have to figure out how to forward my slide. There we go. The community map. I mentioned this earlier, but I'll say it one more time. If for some reason you are participating as maybe your club is doing a bird walk or something, and it's open to the public in particular, we've provided this map where you can go in and enter your event. And it's really fun for a couple of reasons. First of all, it's really inspiring to see how many events are happening all over the world, and you are a part of that, right? In whatever corner you are in. And then it's also a great tool to invite other people to join your flock if you are indeed open to the public. The map is quite filled out right now. We have about 200 or so on there, and usually it goes over 400 by the time of the weekend. And it's nice for people that maybe are newer to birds and want to maybe bird in community, but they really don't know where they would begin to connect with other bird people. So you can zoom in on your part of the world and see if there's any events near you. And I don't know if anybody on the call today is an educator or knows an educator, but classrooms love this. You could do it at recess. You could do it want a break in the day or whatever. So there's some resources on our website for those of you that might want to nudge some educators in your family or lives to participate. This is one of my favorite pictures from South Carolina. This was a group of early elementary school kiddos that the teacher made a nice sort of cheat sheet visual of the kind of birds that they might see, and they went out and participated. This top image is Nicaragua, a young group of birders in Nicaragua, and then Kenya. We literally get people from all over the world participating, and it can be a little trickier with children. So on the website, I give some hints and ideas for how teachers and educators can do this with young people if they're interested. Or if you yourself have young people in your lives, grandkids, nieces and nephews, these resources might be helpful for you as well if you want to engage the younger folks. So hopefully, I've convinced you that participating in GBBC sounds like something fun to do in February, but perhaps you are like myself and you would like to do more than just report birds. And perhaps you are like myself and you're a gardener. And what we do in and around our homes, in our gardens, is actually one of the most important things that we can do for birds. So as a part of my own personal passion, I started a project at the lab called Garden for Birds. And it's really all about supporting people in creating habitat for birds and biodiversity in and around their homes, no matter how big they are. Whether you only have a porch or a patio and you're just going to add some pots that birds might benefit from, or whether you have a larger landscape. This is one of our participants from last year. We do a lot of photo sharing and uploading as a part of this tool. And this was a new, not a new home, but a new homeowner that moved into this home in Arizona and wanted to immediately retrofit the front yard to be more supportive of birds. And this was really just one summer of installation. And you can see how gorgeous the after is. They took this image in the fall and they reported immediately different kinds of bird species. I think they had over 21 different bird species within just a couple of months of putting it in, numerous insects and reptiles and so forth using this beautiful habitat. And that has been my personal experience as a gardener, habitat gardener, and is a reoccurring experience that I hear from people. It doesn't take long. The minute we really start to garden specifically for birds and wildlife and biodiversity, they find it. This is one of my other favorite stories, and this is sort of the gold standard of what our Garden for Birds project wants to move towards, to be able to quantify with real solid data how transformations in our landscape, when we intentionally plant native habitat for birds, how that influences the populations over time. So this is somebody who I've been working with for a couple of years now to help grow this effort. This is a homeowner in Florida. He and his wife are avid eBird submitters. And in 2019, this is what their front yard looked like. And they go all over places and a lot in their community, but they travel and they record birds. And they were so deflated. You know, we only see 37 different types of bird species here. I think we can do better. We're in Florida, right? There's migrants moving through all the time. There's lots of endemic birds. We should have more birds in this. So they began a retrofit of their front yard. They put in a nice little privacy fence. They added all native habitat, trees, shrubs, lower growing forbs, and the data speaks for itself. The black line there is when the garden went in, so you can see their eBird recordings, and then it's almost an exponential growth over time. In 2024, they had 165 different bird species throughout their calendar year, either stopping. Some of them nested there, but at least they were stopping by at least once. So this works. When you start to plant and create gardens and take action to actually support birds, not only are you helping them, but you get the gift of being able to see them so close to your own home. So if you are a gardener and maybe you already are doing a lot for birds, this is a great project to join like-minded folks. If you're a gardener and you want to do more for birds, this might be a fun project for you to join. So that is the website down there, gardenforbirds.org. And there are both of the links of the projects I talked about today. Birdcount.org is the website for the GBBC, and gardenforbirds.org is the URL for the Garden for Birds project. And I just want to thank Sheila and Robin and Kathleen for letting me plug that project at the end. And I would be happy to take some questions. Thank you all.
Thank you, Becca. I've already got my binoculars ready.
Wonderful.
And I have been exploring eBird and Merlin as well. And I have used the sound feature in my own yard, and it really is incredible. So thank you all. Just one question to start us off. Can you give an example of how the Great Backyard Bird Count has impacted conservation efforts or altered conservation efforts for something? So you gave us some examples in your talk, but could you share with us a few more examples of that, maybe in real time, how it changed things?
Sure. So GBBC data is generally looked at with combining the eBird database. We don't tend to only look at GBBC data because it's a single sort of, portion of time in the year, but we look at it as it relates to the larger database. And so in terms of conservation efforts, man, there are so many different types of things. We obviously have been very cognizant of how bird population changes in where birds are sort of residing is shifting with changing temperature is one of the pushing features there. So hummingbirds, for example, are staying in areas longer later into the season than they were previously. They're even pushing further north into habitats that we haven't seen them as frequently. Those are one of the species we've been paying close attention to. And fortunately, it doesn't seem to be harming hummingbird populations, but it's certainly a change in terms of their migratory behaviors and patterns. And so, one of the questions remains is as birds continue to sort of move into areas where we don't currently or historically see a lot of them, what happens when we get these big weather events? And maybe one season it's not as warm as these birds that are expecting it to be, and then they go through cold fronts and so forth. So we're paying very close attention to those kinds of observations in the data. There was a big significant, and there was one this year too, but obviously we don't have the data yet. There was a big birds literally fell out of the sky in the Southwest a couple of years ago. It was very alarming. People literally, warblers in particular, were falling from the sky, and there was a lot of concern about what that was caused by. And it turns out that there was massive fires happening in California, and it was right during migration season. And so, as the warblers were moving, they were trying to avoid the fires, which was taking them off their normal migratory route. They were having a hard time at getting enough fuel to continue their migration. So they were running out of food along the way, and they were literally starving, so they couldn't continue their flight. And so again, one can begin to ask, well, what can we do about that in terms of conservation? And one of the answers is we need to make sure these birds have resources in all of the places, so that we are maximizing the likelihood that they're going to have successful migrations. So, some of the actual conservation efforts that we really need to be putting into place, we're still sort of figuring that out as we have noticed declines. The wetlands is probably the happiest story. Wetland conservation has become incredibly important in various places around the US and Canada, and the birds are responding. We're actually seeing increases in wood ducks and various other kinds of waterfowl because we are taking care of our wetlands in a way that we weren't even 30 or 40 years ago.
Okay. We have a question from Catherine. If one or more people are on account, should only one person report,
Great.
even if they're seeing and hearing the same birds?
Yeah, if you're birding as a group, one person should be the data entry. And depending on what tool you're using, I probably wasn't as clear as I needed to be on that. But Merlin, you're only going to tell us that you saw that bird. It's considered an incidental sighting, which is important data, but you don't tell us how many. So, one person on that walk can say, we saw this bird at that time. If you're entering your bird into eBird, one person should enter it, but there is a section on your checklist where you can say how many people participated in that observation. And that is where I encourage people to make sure that your group size is accurate. So if you're out with a group of three, one person's reporting it, but they can say that this bird was seen by three different people.
Okay. We have a question from Karen. What are the pros and cons of backyard bird feeders and bird baths? She's concerned about attracting cat predators and contaminants in the bath water. So is there a specific height, I'm adding to this question, that you want to hang bird feeders, or do you have some advice for her?
Yes, I'm so glad this question is being asked because it's making me aware of how important it is. And I'm grateful for this question that this person realizes when we draw birds in with feeders and water, we are creating an opportunity to take care of that bird, but we want to make sure that that experience is safe for the bird, right? Because we're trying to support them. So a couple of answers to this. I'll start with feeders first. Where and how you hang feeders is a pretty independent choice. Different birds will use different types of feeders. So I generally tend to be a suet feeder, which attracts a lot of woodpeckers, sapsuckers, warblers, actually, and Carolina wren family tends to like a lot of suet. Other birds will use it too, but those kind of tend to be the favored ones. And then I also usually have a platform feeder for a lot of the birds that don't want to necessarily forage in an actual, feeding hopper. And then I have a couple of hoppers and a couple of tube feeders. So it's important to keep in mind that the more diversity of feeders that you have, the different types of birds that you may attract. In order to minimize predation, there are protective cones and baffles that you can put on poles so that things like squirrels and other raccoons and things that might crawl up and try to utilize the feeders, it minimizes that. Those cones can also be put on top of the feeding stations, and that minimizes predation by raptors. It doesn't eliminate it, but it makes it a little bit safer. The cones on top can also minimize cats. Now, there is no 100% fix to cat predation except keeping cats inside. So if you have neighbors that have outdoor cats, it's risky to put out feeders, right? Because if those cats are going to roam, they're going to like bird feeders as a feeding station. But sometimes you can put cones on the top of the stations, and that minimizes cats going up into trees or shrubs, for example, and having easy access to sort of jump over and access them. So, water baths are similar. Similar to feeders, different heights of water bath are going to attract different species. So, your juncos, your cardinals, even jays, some of the ground feeding preferable birds will like lower water baths. And then, hip or higher water baths are going to probably bring in some different species. The most important thing with water and feeders is cleaning. Our recommendation for bird baths is a light, mild scouring once a week of your bird bath and dumping that water out. That helps not only to keep the water clean and the dish clean, but if you are in an area with mosquitoes, it disrupts the mosquito life cycle because usually they reproduce within a week. So empty that water out, a light scouring, and then refill it if you have like a stagnant water. And then in terms of feeders, we recommend a very mild detergent, soap, and water every 2 weeks. So every couple of weeks after you've emptied out the feeders, and you can take a minute to just clean them really quickly, air dry them, and then set them back up. And I know this is a long answer, but one more thing. If you ever see your songbirds sick, if you see eye disease problems or birds hanging at the feeders and not looking well, you want to take your feeders down because any kind of contamination that sick bird might have, they could leave in that feeding area, and you want to take them down, leave them down for at least a week or two. the birds will come back, but it will displace whatever may have been, ailing the birds, and then it's safe to start up again. But always be monitoring any kind of a bird feeding station to make sure that the birds look happy and healthy.
And then a follow-up question to that one from Lauren. She wants to know about tossing out bird seed on the ground in one's garden.
Totally fine, as long as you're okay with it perhaps germinating. I get sunflower, I do a lot of black oil sunflower seed feeding at my stations, and I get sunflowers in the most random places on my property. So as long as you're comfortable with that, there's no problem.
Yes, I had that experience too.
It's kind of fun, actually.
Happy coincidence. Um, and then if someone is just starting out on their birding journey, do you have any recommendations for what types of binoculars to purchase?
This is a good question I get frequently. So the lab has a couple of incredible articles and recommendations. If you go to allaboutbirds.org and just in the search engine hit binoculars, there's a couple of really great articles that will help you pick and choose. I am one of those birders that I I don't live and die by my binoculars when I'm birding. I do take my binoculars and I do use them, but I also try to really use my eyes first and I try to locate the birds. This time of year where I'm at, I'm doing a lot of birding from inside and they're coming very close to me. So I generally have a Celestron pair. 80 by 40, pretty basic. I'm not a sexy binocular user. So anything that has a pretty good magnification, you're probably going to do fine. But if you're really interested in sort of a sharp, crisp image, look on the All About Birds website, and they'll give you a couple of different recommendations. The lab is sponsored for a variety of projects by Zeiss, is another really great company. Celestron's a great company, and then of course Swarovski if you really want to up your game and get some of the best of the best. But I would be cautious not to, especially if you're just getting into birding, don't feel like you got to get the most expensive pair of binoculars. A pretty standard set will actually be enough to see a lot and to make you realize how beautiful these birds are when you are using binoculars with them. You, Sheila, just got a pair, right? Do you like your pair?
Ooh, I do. I do. My husband bought them for my birthday, so I am so happy to have them. Because
What's the
this is the
company
year.
yours is? What's
Excuse me?
what's the company yours are?
Um, Athlon.
Nice. That's a good company as well.
Yeah. Um, okay, we have another question. This one's from Catherine. Is there a way we can see the immigration pattern for specific birds on a computer or app?
Yes. For those that liked those pretty graphics and map that I was sharing, that is called eBird status and trends. So again, in a Google search bar, if you type in eBird status and trends, and if you want me to send some of this to you, Sheila, as a follow-up to send out to people, I can do that. Um, but you can actually type in the names of different birds. We don't have status and trends data for every bird species, but many of them in North America we do. We're still kind of, as you can imagine, all the data we've collected over the years, some birds we have an immense amount of data and we can do a lot more with the graphics, and other bird species that are more rare, we don't have enough to do that with. But yes, if you go to eBird status and trends, you can look up by bird species and see a lot of really incredible graphics about how birds are doing all over North America.
Well, I know how active the Cornell Lab of Ornithology is. Could you share with us how people might be able to access that website as well to learn about the Garden for Birds and where to go for that? Someone's asked to check the Garden for Birds website, so I don't know if that means they were having a little difficulty. But just back to the Cornell Lab of Ornithology's website, could you talk a little bit about some of the webinars and other types of programs that will help people if they're interested in learning more?
Sure, absolutely. And for those of you who are perhaps going to the websites as we're talking, right before I got on this call, there was some kind of a internet crash across the Cornell pages. So if you're trying to go to them right now, I don't know if it's been resolved since we've been talking. So have no fear. There was something affecting the connections. But yes, the Cornell Lab of Ornithology website, if you go to that, there's a lot of places to navigate to the various, as Sheila said, there's a lot going on. There's drop downs for eBird. eBird does two big events as well for documenting birds that might be of interest to folks that are interested in this idea. There's one in May, Global Big Day, where we count as many birds as we can in 24 hours. And then there's another one in October. So it's really amazing, as you can probably imagine, when we do these big events and then we have all this data we can piece together over the span of the year. So eBird, you'll be able to sort of see their activities. There's also several other participatory science projects that have a slightly different angle to them. Project Feeder Watch is on the Cornell Lab of Ornithology page. That is another project out of the Cornell Lab. So if you have feeders or you have native habitat gardens where you have a lot of birds, that project runs November to April, and that's on our website. You can participate in that. Those of you who love nesting birds, there's a project to actually document, it's called Nest Watch, where you can document birds that are nesting and you can monitor them. If you have nest boxes on your property, that's a really fun way to sort of share and contribute your data for nesting birds. There's some K-12 for educator resources. It's a K-12 program. There are many programs. It can be a little bit overwhelming, actually. But if you go to the Cornell Lab of Ornithology page and you hit on the participatory science dropdown, there's lots of different ways that you can explore projects and get involved.
Thank you. Feeders are very popular today. Catherine has another question. Is it okay to put feeders near windows where cats can see them, or would it stress out the birds or the
That's a really good question. And it also, again, warms my heart that you're asking about an indoor kitty, because that is where the birds are the safest. I have an indoor kitty,
Mhm.
and it is one of our favorite things to do is to sit and watch the birds. She loves it. We'll sit there together and have a warm beverage. And I have not had the experience where it torments her. I know that sure should be a consideration, but we sit and we watch the birds. She's an indoor cat. She seems happy to do that. She can tell that I enjoy watching them, I think. So she will join them with me. It has not startled my birds. So I can only speak from my experience. Obviously, if she were to get out, that could be very disruptive. We're very careful about that. The most important thing, however, for the birds in a situation like that, and this is whether or not you have an indoor cat or not, is to make sure that you protect those windows with some kind of a window treatment that makes them visible to birds, so that the birds do not collide with those windows and then become injured. So we have a variety. Stopbirdcollisions.org is a new collaborative partnership at the lab. Again, I can send these links to you if you'd like. I use a variety of different window protections right by my feeders, and I also have them around my house in areas where I've had bird collisions happen. The most tricky thing about creating habitat or having feeders near your home is those windows can be very dangerous to birds. Most birds that collide with windows, even if they fly away, do not survive. They get bleeds in their brain, and they generally don't make it. So most important, aside from keeping the cat inside, if you're going to do that, is make sure those windows are visible to birds. Screens are also great. If you have screens on your outside, the birds will not collide with screens generally. There's always a few exceptions to that. So screens suffice as well.
Okay. And then related to that question, since you brought up collisions, is do you, if a bird does collide with a window and you see that it's collapsed, what should you leave it alone, pick it up, or what? I give you an example. I was on campus and a bird had collided with the front of our science building, and that was big plate glass windows. And the students were all crowding around this little bird, and one of them picked it up and then held it, and it revived and eventually flew away. So is there any concern about what to do if you encounter a bird, and when do you know it needs to be taken to wild care or some kind of intervention?
Yeah, like I said, the vast majority of birds, even when they fly away, if they hit hard enough, even if it just stuns them, generally they do not make it. That said, there are rehabilitation facilities. If you, in that particular situation, as you described, if I had the means on me or the way to find them, I would probably have taken that bird and put it into a brown paper bag is kind of literally the protocol usually so that the bird is not able to see or fly away. And I probably would have tried to get that bird to a rehabilitation facility. I obviously that those are somewhat hard to find in your area. Sometimes cooperative extensions have wildlife facilities that they can recommend out to you. Sometimes universities have facilities. We have one here at Cornell University where a lot of these bird collision birds go. And if they can be rehabilitated, they release them. But they usually put them under some kind of an observatory period, and sometimes the birds make it and sometimes they don't. And if they do survive after, I don't know what the protocol is, I think it's a couple of weeks,
Mm.
then they will release them back out into the wild. Um, and in terms of handling birds, better to have gloves on. There's not a lot of risk of contamination or disease necessarily unless they're sick, but always good protocol is to protect your hands. And then if you don't have gloves, just make sure you wash your hands well after you release that bird. Um, it's tricky and it's a judgment call. And obviously, if the bird flies away, there's not a whole lot you can do at that point.
Okay. Well, we have an interesting question. One of our participants says that a neighbor told her they have a rare bird in their feeder. It's a white and black small bird. Um, they thought it might be a parakeet, but she emphatically said no. So could you explain to her how she would go about reporting that?
Sure. Well, there's a couple of ways. If the bird is coming to a feeder, it might be possible to capture a photo of the bird. I didn't talk about it explicitly in this talk because people usually discover it as they're using Merlin. But if you're able to get a photo of the bird and it's a decent photo, um,
This has photos.
oh, good. So they can zoom, you can upload your photo to or take the photo with your phone, and it go in the Merlin tool, and then zoom in on the bird as much as you can in the frame that it gives you, and then hit identify. And if it is indeed a rare bird, it'll let you know. And sometimes it'll even question, are you sure that's what you're seeing in that location? So that might be the first step is to see if you can get a photo and ID it in Merlin, and then confirm it in Merlin. And then if you feel confident about the identification, you can either just leave it in Merlin or you can also report it as a rare bird to eBird if you wanted to do that as well. And I should say, just so that the audience is clear, so again, Merlin is just species seen on a particular date, and you don't report amounts. But what the Merlin and eBird work in synergistic relationship with one another. So the more birds that are identified at different locations, even rare examples is a good one. In eBird, we eventually use that data to upload Merlin because, as I articulated a little earlier, we're seeing birds in places we didn't see them before. And so we have to constantly be updating our data in order to reflect the most accurate sense of where bird species are. A specific example of that is bald eagles. Bald eagles have come back like crazy on the east, and we weren't seeing them even in parts of New York and New Hampshire and Maine and Vermont, and now they're back in abundance. And we've had to update Merlin several times using eBird bald eagle data because people are like, I swear I know my bald eagles, we're seeing them. So it is really nice to enter data into both tools because they work together to make our accuracy as good as possible.
And then maybe just in case her question was also directed to who to report it to locally, obviously the Audubon, we have two Audubon locations in Marin County that can be easily looked up. And so I would defer to the Audubon.
Yeah. Yeah, Audubon would be great to help confirm that it's a rare bird. Absolutely.
I think we have answered all of the questions. One final question maybe, when the data goes in, how soon after is the data updated for viewers if you wanted to access information?
Yeah, you always have access to your data. So the minute you create and we do require people to create an account to participate in the Great Backyard Bird Count. You don't have to sign up separately, but if you're using Merlin or eBird for the first time, you'll be prompted to create an account with an email. And one of the reasons that we do require that is because it is data, and we have to be able to validate it and connect it to a human and a location. So that is why that is there. Um, so in terms of seeing your data, you can see it right away in real time on your tool. In terms of seeing cumulative amounts of data over time from the GBBC event, that's constantly being updated on the eBird website, and I have that running on the homepage of the GBBC event. So you can go to it, you can see the map, and you can see the birds that we're identifying and the places on the eBird data. But the GBBC data, I do a pretty deep analysis of, and I report out to participants usually by the middle of March. We allow people to submit data for those 4 days because some people go on trips and then they come back and they share their data later than the 16th. So as long as the data was collected over the 13th through the 16th, we allow people to enter birds until March 1st. So usually around March 1st, I export all of the data, and then I'll develop a final report and share out. So you can see the data in real time in eBird. You can see your own data like immediately in the tools, but in terms of sort of the analysis of the event, that usually comes out by the middle of March.
Okay. And then just about conservation, if you're an organization that is involved in conservation or wants to monitor some properties that your organization manages, is there a different way to access the data, or would it be similar to how we would access the data?
That is a really good question, and I'm not sure who's asking it, but we could have some follow-up back and forth. eBird has a couple of ways that you can create sort of a focused group, so to speak, often in a focused location, and you can have contributors contributing to that particular project or piece of land that you're monitoring. And then you can kind of have it's like having a project within eBird that is focal to something that you're monitoring. So we can set those up. I actually have a project like that for Garden for Birds. So everybody who's participating in Garden for Birds and sharing their garden species are doing it to this one project, so we can see that in one place. And you can set those up for a variety of different purposes, different organizations, different events, and so forth. So it's a little more complicated than I can walk through here, but I'd be happy to walk somebody through that through email if they're interested.
Okay. All right, that's all of our questions. Thank you, Becca, for joining us today. I'm excited to get started and join everybody this President's Weekend to share my observations. I hope our participants will too. We look forward to learning more about birds. Thank you again.
Thank you for having me. It was lovely.
And thank you to all of our attendees today for joining us for today's forum on the Great Backyard Bird Count. We invite you to join our Speakers Forum events, our live events, as well as our upcoming webinar on February 26th at 1 p.m. with, excuse me, hold on, I will just share a slide to make this a little easier. So if you can access this. There we go. And so we will be having an upcoming Zoom webinar with Daniel Swain. He's a climatologist and he studies extreme weather events. And he will talk to us about what we know and what we don't know about California climate change. He's sort of a go-to climatologist that a lot of news organizations and the LA Times, for example, go to help us and you understand what's happening in our weather and how it's impacting us at home. So we hope you join us for that event. I've listed here on the top of this slide the public events webpage on the Outdoor Art Club, where our speaker forum, live events, and our upcoming webinar is listed. So if you would like to register for those, please visit Outdoor Art Club at public events. Today's webinar will be has been recorded and will be shared on our public website under past events and videos. You can access that by going to our webpage at the Outdoor Art Club under public events or through the drop-down menu, on public events. Thank you all again for joining us, and we hope to see you again.